Sure. So I'm Melissa Gorelia. I am the training director over at StarVista. We are a nonprofit in San Mateo County. Um, yeah, and we kind of are spread out throughout the county. So we've got a lot of different services and a lot of different locations. StarVista is really a holistic, strength-based organization. We really strive to meet our clients where they're at. I think one of the things that makes our site unique is that we work with so many different populations. So we are working with people from 0 through to adulthood. And so when I share about our program, sometimes it's a bit challenging because we do have over 30 clinical programs within our agency. So I think, for us, we want to make sure that, the students that are interested in our site have exposure to all of those different programs because there's so much diversity in what we offer as a placement site. So that said, we have 4 kind of main departments that hold our clinical services versus our early childhood and community department, which is focused on our younger kiddos, so the 0 to 5 group and their caregivers. Then we have our school-aged and transitional age youth group, which is focused obviously on our school-based programs. We have about 6 school-based programs that have a bit of a different focal point depending on which one students are interested in. Our transitional youth age programs and our residentials are focused on adolescents and those transitioning out of adolescence. So we've got 3 residential programs. We have another program working on site at the San Mateo County Juvenile Hall. And then we have our adult group, which is really focused on wellness and recovery. So we've got, I would say, probably about 6 or so different adult programs that focus on recovery. Some of those are day treatment programs. Some of those are more group-based. And so there's a lot of diversity in what we have to offer. There's also a bit more general batch of programs, which would be our Pride Center that serves everyone in the community, as well as our counseling center, which is, again, a very community-based outpatient facility where we are working with people from all different phases and stages of life. In each program that can vary. As you can imagine, we have so many different types of programs that the work in each of those programs will vary considerably, just based on the nature of where that program is situated in the community, or the type of work that's being done. Typically, what we see most of our students engaging in is obviously their client work, depending on what population they're working with, and then they'll have 2 hours of didactic every week. They will have 2 hours of, and I know this question's coming up in a bit, 2 hours of group supervision, an hour of individual supervision. And then outside of that, really the bulk of the time on site is then more administrative, right? So any type of paperwork, any type of staff meeting, that kind of encompasses the remainder of the time on site. So some of our programs are all streamlined referrals through the county. Some are referred through, self-referral process. It just varies pretty considerably depending on where you are. As you can imagine, folks that are in residential programs are coming through very different channels than folks in some of our mandated alcohol or drug treatment programs. So the referral process will vary pretty significantly from site to site. And in terms of assessment, the types of assessments or screeners that are done will also vary depending on the population. So, the things that we're using in our adult alcohol and drug treatment are not obviously going to be the same things we're using in any of our school-based programs. So a lot of the answers to these questions are very site specific. And so it's hard to have, all of us present at, an interview like this, but yeah, that's why we do offer a placement fair so folks can come and meet each of those program managers, just because it's difficult to convey the nuances of 30 programs in this format. So I apologize. we expect about 50% of their time to be clinical, so direct service with clients. And again, depending on what the program structure is, that can be a wide range of, caseloads. Some of our more intensive programs, we are expecting folks to be spending more time with each individual, whereas some of our less restrictive programs, they're spending a bit less time with more individuals. So the kind of overarching guideline for us is we are matching folks with 50% direct service time. Typically, all of our master's level folks are linked with one individual supervisor and a group supervisor. There are times where those might be the same person. So, that is just something to consider. One of the other considerations for supervision are some programs do closed supervision and some programs do open supervision. And the difference between those for us is open supervision will include folks from other programs at the agency, whereas closed will be just specific to that program. We give our program managers kind of the flexibility to decide how they want their group supervision to go. And if closed is something they want to consider, it's generally because the population's a bit more intense and our clinicians are spending more time with clients kind of together as a group. So it doesn't make quite as much sense to have folks from other programs engage in those group supervisions. But yes, typically we are offering 3 hours of supervision to our group and 1 is individual. Do a 2-hour didactic every week. This year we are doing that all virtual as all of the services are being done virtually, as is the supervision. The benefit we're noticing this year, so it is likely to continue into the future, is that by offering these didactic training sessions virtually, students can access them at a later time. So we're recording them and then folks can access them later at a time that might be more convenient. As you can imagine, with 30 programs, scheduling is sometimes hard. So we've always had one day that's dedicated to training. And now in this format, we see that might not necessarily, be reason to pull them from any programmatic thing. We can have them attend that training virtually later. So again, we are offering a 2-hour weekly didactic. I would say that it is a broad range of what topics are covered, just because we do expect that each program in the agency gives some exposure to the type of work, the service model that they're working from, any types of specific modalities or ways that they're treating at their program specifically. And then within each program, there's a bit more of a depth understanding of the types of work that gets done. So they're doing more in-depth training at the program level, and there's more breadth overview at the agency level. So we get to have exposure to all of the different populations that StarVista works with. So I would say this year more than ever, I would say flexibility. I think that there's a lot of benefit to having access to so many different populations, but sometimes things, for whatever reason, require a little more flexibility. And 2020 seems to be really pulling on all of those strings. So yeah, I think, it really depends on what kind of community interface, the program has. But I think, being strength-based is kind of our focus. And I lots of different training opportunities pop up either within the agency or outside the agency. So flexibility, interest in the work, passion, I would say would probably be at the forefront of my mind when I'm talking to people, just because as a community-based organization, things pop up and things change. And so, I would also say a sense of humor. I think, we rely a lot on our connections with one another. And so StarVista often feels very much like a family. And I think, leaning on folks and being able to advocate for interests of yours really help enrich the training experience. So I always tell students, If there's something that you want to do and you're excited about doing it, and maybe your program doesn't do that right now, that doesn't mean that we can't do it. Let us know. And if there's a way to kind of meld those things together within your program, we will work with you to make that happen. If there's not a way to do it within your program, let's figure out a way for you to do it at the agency. So I think, flexibility in thinking, self-advocacy are two that I would say come to mind. So for us, I would say that, in the programs with more high client need, there have sometimes been, challenges around being able to address those needs as a trainee. So we fortunately have, the space and ability to shift someone if that does come up as a particular challenge. So sometimes there are just site specific population challenges. That we can really work with and kind of shift and pivot if needed. I would say the other thing that comes up year to year is paperwork. I think that's kind of like the universal, elephant in the room that can be challenging for people. And that again is something that varies site to site. So some sites do have more stringent criteria and others are a bit more relaxed. And so I think, another thing, as I'm saying that out loud, I think sometimes it can be challenging to, be in a large cohort. Our training cohorts are generally between 30 and 40 from multiple degree designations. But being part of a large cohort like that, where you're sitting next to someone who's in the same group, but their requirements are very different. So sometimes it's not a shared experience in the same way. So I think that can feel challenging because you do have a lot of resources by being part of such a large cohort, but sometimes they're just not a match in terms of what one is experiencing in comparison with the other. I would say otherwise, I think the challenges right now are very different than the challenges were last year. So last year when we were interviewing our incoming cohort, the expectation was that they would be on site. And so that was a particular challenge for this year, where we had to kind of move people from that on-site expectation to now everything will be done virtually. So there's been, a technology training component that wasn't there in any prior year. And now as I look forward for this next year, I realize people are not really sure what we're interviewing for because we're not quite sure when this will end. And it could be an asset that folks have had a year to kind of deal with any technology challenges that have come up, and that could make next year a little smoother. So I think the challenges we see vary pretty significantly, but this year there have been some kind of universally shared challenges around moving into this model and moving 30 programs into a virtual remote model, of service providing. So it varies. But I'm hopeful now that people have had a year of distance engagement that next year that part will be a little smoother. So we do a lot of hiring from within. I think that's always appealing for folks. So I started as a trainee in 2011. I have stayed on. Now I'm our training director, and I also oversee one of our clinical departments. The same is true for our CEO. She started as a trainee and has kind of moved through the ranks of the agency. And I bring that up because, as I mentioned, StarVista does have a very family-like feel to it. Even though we are large and we're very spread out throughout the county, I think there's always been sort of we want to meet our staff and our students where they are in the same way we work with our clients. So when I came on as an intern, I really wanted to do one kind of therapy with one client, and my supervisor didn't know how to supervise for that particular modality. And she suggested that I walk down the hall literally and see if anyone in the suite knew how to do that and could supervise me. And by the time I got to the end of the hallway, I had a supervisor for the case. And so I think part of the benefit of having so many professionals working in so many different areas is they become a resource for our students. So if I don't know how to do it, it's likely I can reach out and connect you with someone who does. So just because my answer is no, I'm so sorry, it doesn't have to stop there. So we have kind of the ability to answer questions that I think we might not otherwise be able to if we were a bit smaller, and didn't have people working in so many different areas. Other things, let's see, we take rolling applications for master's level students. Because we have such a diversity in programming, we don't necessarily have to adhere to a strict start date. That said, we typically have our orientation and our main cohort on onboarding in August. So generally like the second or third week in August is when we have folks start. One of the main reasons for that is because we do have so many school-based programs that it makes sense to start them on the academic calendar. And that seems to align really well with a lot of our graduate programs. But that is not the only pathway in. So there is flexibility around start dates. All of our applications are done online through our website, and I will share that information with you later. On our online application, we ask for a resume, a cover letter, and 3 letters of recommendation. If students want to apply today and don't have letters of recommendation ready, that's okay. You can submit your application without those letters and have those sent later to us. We are not in a major rush. As long as we have those before we send out our HR packets, we're in good shape. So, you know, as applications come in, we review them on a rolling basis. So really, as they're received, they're reviewed and sent out. When you apply, you can select up to 3 programs of interest. And the reason for that is because we do have so many population overlaps that sometimes, you know, some of our smaller programs that only take 1 or 2 interns may fill up before they get your application. And so, you know, what we like to do is say, well, we've got 3 residential programs. They all work with a very similar population. You know, if you're interested in that work, there's a couple of doors you can go through. So we're really not in competition with ourselves. We want students and programs to feel like they have the best match possible. And so if for whatever reason in your ranking, you know, the first one doesn't feel like a great fit, there's still other options for your placement with our agency. We do not do student group interviews, but there may be times when students are in an interview with more than one of us. And the reason for that is just kind of efficiency. So we can all kind of work together and say like, wow, this person was really great fit for this at my program, not so much a great fit for this, and kind of work together around that. So no student group interviews, but there might be up to 3 of us at one of the interviews. We will host a program fair similar to a practicum fair, where all of our managers will be available that are accepting applications for the upcoming year. They are there to answer all of the ins and outs, scheduling questions and population questions and paperwork questions that I just might not have all of the answers for. The benefit to coming to that is you do get to, you know, get a flavor for the people in the program, and you get to learn a little bit more about the program. This year that will be virtual. We will offer 2, and I will share the dates when we have them. And let's see, I think it's a really beneficial use of time to just pop into one of those fairs. The other thing is, if a student happens to apply before that fair and they come to the fair and would like to reroute their application for any reason, they can do so at that time. So we're not kind of, you know, sticking you with your first choices. If it changes, that's fine too, because you may have learned something that makes us all feel like you're a better fit at another one of the programs. So I think that's it.